The beacon had gone silent 3 hours ago, and on the Rose 4, silence never meant peace. Up above, the sky burned with slow rivers of light, auroras drifting through glass-like clouds, painting everything in a pale, shifting glow. The trees here weren't wood. They were crystal, tall, thin, and alive, each one humming faintly like the planet itself was breathing. The air carried the taste of cold metal and storm. Even the wind sounded strange, not a whisper, not a roar, something between a sigh and a song. Through that glowing maze, 12 hunters moved. Tall, armored, silent. Their shapes flickered between light and shadow, their movements too smooth to belong to flesh. At their head was Vorn, alpha of the Cathri, and tonight he wasn't hunting prey. He was looking for blood. Each of his steps left a faint burn mark on the glowing soil, his armor leaking traces of radiation from old battles. That armor had seen 17 worlds, 17 wars, but nothing like this. Vorn's people, the Cathri, were the oldest predators this side of the Orion Rift. They were warriors before humans had even left their own sky. Their instincts had been sharpened by centuries of survival, no fear, no hesitation. But even predators bleed. Even they lose what they love. 3 days ago his cubs were taken. 3 young ones, his blood. Their signal beacon had flared once, high above the forest. Then it died. No last message. No proof of death. Just silence. And now, every step Vorn took was guided by that silence. The pack followed close behind, scanning the forest, reading every pulse and vibration through their combat sensors. The planet was alive, filled with movement, energy, the hum of creatures too small to see. But beneath all that noise, Vorn could feel something else. Something wrong. A trace of burned metal in the air. A pattern in the soil, square, artificial. And then, through the glow of the trees, he saw it. A human outpost. Small. Crude. Surrounded by cables and noise. Machines hummed where there should have been quiet. Lights blinked where darkness belonged. Humans. The word tasted bitter. They were still young, clumsy explorers clawing their way across the stars, leaving machines where life once grew. They never understood the worlds they touched. They just used them. Vorn's golden eyes narrowed. He crouched at the ridge, the pack forming around him, 12 shadows waiting for a single command. Through his visor, he counted them, 23 humans, moving inside the metal shelters. Armed. Alert. They were expecting something. Maybe even him. Good. Let them expect death. Vorn's claws flexed, catching the light as he whispered into the neural link, his voice a low growl that vibrated in every warrior's chest. Circle them. No noise. No light. The Cathri vanished, melting into the crystal forest like smoke. Vorn stayed still, eyes fixed on the camp below. His breathing slowed until even his heartbeat became silent. Then he heard it. Not through his ears, through instinct. A faint echo beneath the wind. A sound he knew better than his own pulse. A cub's cry. It came from far away, soft and fragile, but it was there. Real. Vorn's throat tightened. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't blink. Then he lowered his head, the words barely a whisper. Hold on, little ones. I'm coming. They moved like ghosts. No sound. No light. Only motion. Between the glass-white trees, the pack spread out, each shadow a heartbeat away from violence. Their fur shimmered faintly under the planet's glow, black against blue, muscle under armor, every movement controlled, lethal, rehearsed. For the Cathri, silence wasn't just discipline. It was respect. You do not roar on sacred ground. You do not hunt loudly on a living world. Vorn led from the front, his steps slow, eyes scanning through his visor's dim glow. 23 human heat signatures in the outpost. 23 beating hearts. He counted every one. Each pulse, each breath. He could almost feel them through the soil. 23, he murmured through the link. Armed. Defensive stance. They know. The response came like a low growl in his earpiece. Then they die knowing. A faint hiss of approval rippled through the pack's shared channel. The Cathri had no love for humans. In their short time among the stars, the species had made a habit of spreading like wildfire, settling on unclaimed worlds, cutting forests, mining mountains, drilling life out of living ground. The Rose 4 was supposed to be untouched, but humans never listened. Vorn crouched behind a ridge of crystal bark, peering down at the settlement. It was ugly, metal huts, cables, engines coughing smoke into clean air. To the Cathri, it was like watching a scar grow across living skin. He could see them moving inside. Nervous. Weapons ready. They'd seen something on scanners, maybe a heat trace, maybe the flicker of a shadow. They didn't know what was coming for them. Vorn's claws flexed. He lifted one hand, and every warrior around him tensed, claws poised, fangs bared, muscles wound like spring steel. One signal, and they would descend upon the humans like the old gods of the hunt. Then, he froze. His nostrils flared. Something was wrong. A faint current drifted through the air, carried by the cold wind, cutting through the metallic stench of human machines. A smell he knew. A smell he could never mistake. Warm fur, home soil, and fear. Vorn's heart jolted once, hard enough to hurt. He took another breath, slow, deep, the kind a hunter takes before a kill. It was them, his cubs, alive. The realization hit like a blade through armor. He turned his head sharply, tracing the scent. It came from the central building, the largest human structure. He could taste it in the air now, faint but real. Impossible. His cubs had been gone 3 days. No trace. No signal. No life signs. And yet the air carried their scent as clearly as if they were beside him. His growl came out low and ragged, trembling with something his pack had never heard from him before: hope. He raised a closed fist. Instantly, the formation froze mid-step. A ripple of confusion ran through their shared channel. No one spoke. No one questioned. They just waited. Vorn's voice came through the link, steady but quieter than before. Hold position. Then he broke from cover alone. The Alpha moved through the glowing mist, his size impossible to hide, yet the forest seemed to bend around him, the bioluminescent light dimming as if the world itself respected his silence. The camp loomed ahead. Metal walls. Warm air leaking through cracks. Human scent heavy now, sweat, gun oil, synthetic fibers, and beneath it all, that faint note of life he thought he'd lost. He reached the open doorway of the main dwelling. A dull orange light spilled out into the forest floor. Inside there was breathing. Human. Steady. Calm. And then, so faint it could have been a memory. A sound. A soft, high-pitched chirp. Followed by another. His heart stuttered. Cubs. He stepped closer, each movement slow, every sense sharpened to the edge of instinct. The night around him held its breath. Even the wind stopped moving. And for the first time in years, the Alpha of the Cathri felt afraid. The doorway was small. Too small for him. Vorn had to bend low, one massive shoulder scraping against the metal frame as he stepped inside. The structure creaked under his weight, the walls too thin, the air too warm, heavy with human scent and something else, something gentle. Light spilled from old lamps, flickering softly across cluttered furniture. The place was a mess, tools, wires, a half-eaten meal, clothes on the floor, a small life carved out of isolation. And at the center of it all, silence. Vorn's eyes adjusted, the glow from his visor dimming as his pupils expanded to drink in every detail. He expected weapons. Blood. He expected the smell of his cubs mixed with death. But what he saw, he did not understand. A human sat in a worn chair. Male. Older. Weathered face, gray streaks in his beard. He didn't move. Didn't reach for the rifle leaning by the wall. He just sat there calm. Watching. And on his chest, curled into a small, sleeping heap, were 3 Cathri cubs. For a heartbeat, Vorn stopped breathing. The air left his lungs like someone had crushed him from inside. His cubs. Alive. Rachel. Then. And little Mira. Their dark fur shimmered faintly in the light, rising and falling with the human's slow breaths. Mira's tiny paw was draped over his collarbone, then's tail flicked in a dream. Rachel snored softly, face buried in the human's shirt. Vorn's vision blurred, his mind trying to make sense of the impossible. This human, sitting motionless, breathing slow and even, while 3 alien cubs slept peacefully on him. Not afraid. Not armed. Just there. The Alpha took one careful step forward, claws flexing against the floor. The human didn't flinch. He only looked up, eyes tired but steady. They were scared, he said quietly. His voice was rough, worn thin from hours without rest. I found them in a trap, about 6 kilometers west. Old one, left behind by the first survey team. The little one's leg was caught. Vorn's gaze snapped to Mira. Her left hind leg was wrapped in bandages, clean, precise, scented faintly of antiseptic. She cried for hours, the man continued. Wouldn't let me near her at first. The other 2 tried to fight me. Brave little things. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Reminded me of my daughter at that age. Vorn's claws grazed the floor, metal screeching softly under their weight. The sound made Rachel stir, his ear twitching, but the cub didn't wake. The man noticed. Still didn't move. Still didn't show fear. I sent out a signal, he said after a pause. Figured someone would come looking. Figured it'd be you. He nodded toward a small console glowing faintly on the table. Distress beacon. I tried matching your frequencies. Damaged half my gear doing it. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Didn't mean to scare anyone. Vorn stood motionless. The room felt smaller by the second. Too much warmth, too much stillness. The human's words sank into him like slow rain over stone. The garbled transmission. The faint signal. The silence after. It hadn't been an attack. It had been a call for help. The Alpha's eyes flicked to the food containers scattered nearby. Raw meat, stripped bones, empty ration packs. They ate, the man said softly, following his gaze. Everything I had that wouldn't poison them. I think they liked the freezer meat. He laughed quietly to himself, but there was exhaustion in that sound, the kind that comes after fear, not before it. Then the little one started crying again. Pain, I think. So I sat down. She climbed up here. He looked down at the sleeping cubs. Then the others followed. They've been like this for an hour, maybe two. He exhaled again, almost whispering. I didn't want to move. Didn't want to wake them. For a long time, Vorn said nothing. The human's voice faded into the stillness, replaced by the sound of 3 small heartbeats pressed against his chest. And in that silence, something shifted inside the Alpha, something ancient and wordless. He, a warborn predator feared across 17 worlds, felt small. Small in the presence of this fragile creature who had shown his children mercy. Vorn lowered himself slowly, knees bending, weight balanced so his claws wouldn't scrape the floor again. The floor groaned under his mass. Raychaw stirred, his golden eyes blinking open. For half a second, confusion, and then recognition. Father, he chirped. Then Mira lifted her head. Then, and suddenly, all 3 were tumbling off the human's chest in a flurry of fur and squeaks. They crashed into Vorn's arms, claws digging harmlessly into his armor, voices high and trembling with joy. And for the first time in his life, the Alpha of the Cathri closed his eyes and let himself fall to his knees. For a long while no one moved. The air inside that small human shelter was thick with quiet, the kind that follows storms. Vorn knelt on the floor, his cubs pressing against him, tiny claws gripping his fur, their scent flooding his senses with relief so strong it almost hurt. He checked each of them like a ritual. Raychaw, unhurt, just tired. Then, a small scratch across his flank. And little Mira, her legs still bound, the bandages firm and clean. They were alive. Safe. Because of this human. The Alpha lifted his gaze. The man, Elias, he remembered hearing him called, stood now, stretching stiff limbs, one hand braced against the table for balance. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just met the alien's gaze with a quiet steadiness that felt older than fear itself. Vorn rose to his full height. The room dimmed beneath his shadow. 3 meters of muscle and claw, every instinct bred for killing, and yet, for the first time in years, his body refused violence. Elias didn't step back. He just nodded once, as if this meeting between hunter and man were the most natural thing in the world. I know you came for them, he said softly. Your pack's outside. My sensors picked them up 10 minutes ago. He paused, the faint hum of machinery filling the space between them. You don't need to worry. I told the others not to shoot. Didn't seem right. Vorn's chest rumbled, low and uncertain. The translator implant at his throat flickered to life, its tone guttural and distorted. You helped them. Elias shrugged lightly. Did what anyone would have done. Then after a pause he smiled, a tired human kind of smile. They're good kids. Brave. You raised them well. Those words, you raised them well, hit Vorn harder than any weapon ever could. Because for the Cathri, family was sacred. It was the one truth that anchored their ferocity. And hearing it from a human, from a species they called reckless and dangerous, it stirred something he hadn't felt since his first hunt. He stepped closer, massive claws curling against the floor. The cubs followed him, pressing against his legs. Elias stood his ground, breathing slow, steady. For a heartbeat, 2 species, 2 predators, simply looked at one another. And in that quiet, something ancient passed between them. Not words. Not thought. Just recognition. Vorn drew in a deep breath. His voice came out like distant thunder. You have my gratitude, Elias Core. The translator repeated his growl in slow, flat human speech. And my oath. The Alpha lowered his head, a gesture never given to outsiders, never to prey. The pack owes you a life debt. Should you or yours ever have need, speak my name to the wind. and the Cathri will answer. For a moment, Elias didn't react. Then he blinked, once, twice, as if unsure he'd heard correctly. Finally, he gave a small nod. Appreciate it, he said quietly. But I'm just glad they're okay. He looked down at the cubs again. They're special, you know. The way they look at you. His eyes softened, voice trembling just slightly. Used to be the same with my daughter. She's grown now. Whole different planet. But when she was small, she'd curl up on my chest and sleep like that. Like nothing in the universe could touch her. Vorn said nothing. He didn't know how to answer a story like that. But something deep in his chest ached. A connection older than war or language. He took a slow step back, the floor creaking under his weight. The cubs clung to his fur, chirping softly, one paw reaching back toward the human. Elias reached out, too, not to touch, but just to wave goodbye. A quiet, wordless farewell. And for the first time in recorded Cathri history, a war-born alpha mirrored a human gesture. Vorn raised one massive hand and waved back. Outside, the forest waited, silent, bioluminescent, alive. Beyond those trees, his pack stood ready, unaware that the battle they had come for had already been replaced by something greater. The alpha turned one last time toward the human. Elias stood in the doorway, framed by that warm light, the kind of light that could never exist in war. For the briefest moment, predator and man shared the same breath. Then Vorn spoke, voice a whisper of thunder. Sleep well, Elias Kor. And then he stepped into the night. The forest was alive with breath and heartbeat. Mist clung to the roots, curling like smoke around the Cathri pack's claws as they waited. Hunters of legend, eyes glowing amber in the starlight. They had come for blood. They had followed their alpha into human territory, teeth bared, ready to tear vengeance into the dirt. But when Vorn finally stepped from the treeline, he wasn't carrying rage. He was carrying silence. The cubs clung to him, drowsy and safe, one still clutching a strip of human fabric like a blanket. The warriors froze. They looked at their alpha, at his eyes, usually molten with fury, now calm, reflecting something vast and unreadable. No one spoke. No one dared. Then, from among them, a young hunter, Rek, stepped forward. His armor still burned with the scent of battle oil. Alpha, he growled, confusion sharp in his tone. We heard the distress call. We came to avenge. To destroy the human who took them. Vorn's gaze found him, not angry, not sharp, but heavy like the weight of time itself. The human, he said slowly, did not take them. He knelt, setting the cubs down gently. Their small claws reached toward his fur, trusting, unafraid. He sheltered them, Vorn continued. Fed them. Bound their wounds with his own hands. A hush fell over the pack. Only the forest wind spoke, whispering between branches like a prayer. Rek frowned, his tail twitching. A trick, perhaps? Vorn's head lifted, and in that single motion, the pack's doubts evaporated. Do you think I cannot smell deceit, Rek? I smelled fear in that place, but not his. The human feared only for them. His voice dropped, almost reverent now. He stood before me unarmed. The cubs slept on his chest, and I sought no prey, no enemy. He paused, eyes distant, glowing faint beneath the canopy. I saw a father. The pack stirred, a ripple of unease, of disbelief. But it was not weakness they sensed. It was something older, something sacred. Vorn straightened, towering above them, his mane catching the pale blue light. Tonight, the hunt ends. The dead is ours. He turned his face toward the direction of the human shelter, the scent of iron and warmth still drifting faintly through the cold air. If that man ever calls my name, he said, his voice rolling through the trees like thunder in deep water, you will run, not to fight, but to protect. For the pack owes him its heart. The forest seemed to bow with the words. The warriors lowered their heads, one by one, until the clearing shimmered with reverence. Even Rek, the boldest among them, dropped to one knee. For the Cathri, an alpha's vow was law. And what Vorn had spoken tonight would be carved into their lineage forever. The cubs yawned, curling against his legs, tiny purrs vibrating in the hush. Vorn's gaze softened. He looked to the stars, far beyond the clouds, where the old wars had been fought and lost. Once, he had believed humans were chaos given flesh. But now he knew better. They were fire, dangerous, untamed, yet capable of warmth. The alpha turned back to his pack. Let the forest remember this night, he said. The night vengeance slept, and mercy woke. And with that, the pack moved, silent shadows disappearing between silver leaves. Only their tracks remained, and the echo of a promise carried on the wind. Somewhere far behind them, inside a lonely human shelter, a man sat awake under dim light, staring at the same stars, unaware that an entire world had just decided to call him brother. The storm had passed. The forest slept under a silver dawn, mist rising from the soil like quiet breath. Inside the shelter, Elias sat alone, one arm bandaged, eyes half closed, listening to the faint hum of the generator. The room still carried traces of them, claw marks on the floor, the faint musk of wild fur, and a strip of broken harness he hadn't been able to throw away. It hung near the window now, like some strange souvenir of a night that had rewritten the stars. He looked out across the treeline. The sunlight caught the dew on the leaves, scattering gold in the wind. For a long time he just watched, not as a soldier, not as an engineer, but as a man who had seen something sacred. The comm unit on his wrist flickered to life. "Base to Outpost 12. You alive down there, Elias?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Still here." "What happened?" "Our scanners caught movement last night, heat signatures, large ones." "Did the pack attack?" Elias paused. His hand brushed against the claw mark etched into the table. For a moment, he could still feel the warmth of the cubs sleeping against him. He could still hear that deep voice, "Sleep well, Elias Core." "No," he said finally, his voice quiet. "There was no attack." He looked toward the forest again, where the shadows still stirred faintly, as if listening. Just a misunderstanding that found its way home. He ended the transmission and sat back, eyes soft with memory. Then faintly, almost too faint for human ears, a sound drifted through the trees. A howl long and low, carried by the wind. Not a hunting call. Not a warning. A salute. Elias closed his eyes, a small smile breaking through the fatigue. He raised his cup of lukewarm coffee, as if returning the gesture. "Till next time," he whispered. Outside, the forest breathed again. And somewhere beyond sight, an alpha looked back toward the horizon, his cubs at his side, the human's scent fading into legend. The Cathri had many songs of war. But after that night, they gained a new one, the song of the sleepless human. A tale of the man who faced the pack, and left them dreaming. The forest seemed different now. The same crystalline trees rose high above them, their glowing veins humming softly in the night air, but the shadows no longer felt like threats. They felt alive, watching, listening. Vaughn moved at the front, his steps steady, cubs padding close to his side. Mira limped slightly, but her eyes shone bright, proud, unafraid. Ren and Reika whispered to each other in chirps and clicks, retelling their version of what had happened. A version filled with bravery, danger, and the strange, gentle human who smelled like smoke and iron. Behind them, the pack followed in silence. Warriors who had once come to spill blood now walked with their weapons sheathed, their heads lowered in thought. They could still smell the humans dwelling far behind them, that faint warmth of metal, fabric, and life. A scent that, strangely, none of them found unpleasant anymore. The Alpha said nothing for a long time. The only sound was the crunch of their steps over the glowing moss, the rhythm of breath, and the faint hum of the planet's wind. Then, as dawn began to stain the horizon pale blue, he finally spoke. "Tell me," Vaughn said quietly, his voice almost lost in the morning air, "what did the human do when he saw you?" Mira glanced up at him, her small ears twitching. "He didn't roar. Didn't run." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "He stayed." Vaughn nodded slowly. "And you weren't afraid?" "No," Reika said. "He was soft. Like warmth." Ren tilted his head. But his eyes were sad. Vaughn's chest rumbled with a low, unreadable sound. The pack behind him listened, but didn't interrupt. To hear cubs speak of kindness was a rare thing among their kind. When they reached the edge of the high ridge, the Alpha stopped. From here, the human colony was just a scattering of metal in the valley, tiny, fragile structures under the endless sky. He looked at them for a long moment, then raised one clawed hand and brushed it against his chest. A warrior's salute turned into something gentler. "The weak are those who cannot show mercy," he whispered, the old creed of his people, spoken not as pride but as revelation. Behind him, the warriors repeated the words in low unison. The forest carried the vow like a living echo, and for the first time in centuries, the Cathri pack marched home not as hunters, but as witnesses to something greater than strength. When the first light of the twin suns touched the horizon, Vaughn turned away, his cubs trotting beside him, their laughter drifting through the trees. Centuries later, in the Hall of Echoes on Cthara Prime, the young listen to stories older than their stars. The air hums with light from memory crystals, each one carrying voices of the past, recorded in the tongues of the ancients. A young cadet, small, silver-furred, her eyes bright with curiosity, steps forward and touches one of the crystals. It flickers to life, projecting faint light against the walls. The voice that speaks is deep, rough with age, and filled with quiet awe. They came for vengeance that night, and found their cubs asleep on a human's chest. The cadet listens, eyes wide. The recording continues, the sound of wind, the whisper of leaves, the soft heartbeat beneath alien fur. He was no warrior, no diplomat, just a builder of machines. Yet his hands held compassion strong enough to still a war pack. His name was Elias Kaur. The cadet glances up at her instructor, an elder with scarred fur and silver eyes. Sir, was it real? Did it truly happen? The elder smiles faintly. I was raised to believe strength was in the claw, he says, until I heard this story. Now I believe strength lives in the heart. He gestures to the mural carved into the hall's far wall, a depiction of a massive Cathri Alpha bowing low before a human seated in a chair, 3 cubs asleep across his chest. Above it, etched in both tongues, are the words that changed their creed forever. Mercy is the echo that outlives the roar. The cadet stands silent for a long moment, her reflection caught in the light of the mural. Then she bows her head, the same way the Alpha once had long ago. Outside, twin suns rise over Kthara Prime, spilling golden light through the glass domes of the Academy. Somewhere deep in space, an old transmission still drifts between the stars, faint, distorted, but carrying a single phrase that time could never erase. Sleep well, Elias Kaur. And with that, the legend ends. Not in battle, but in the heartbeat of a man who dared to be kind.